Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. We are broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality, pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on Facebook, on YouTube, on X, and also on TikTok. It's a lovely British evening here in Glasgow. The weather is lovely. Tell us what it's like where you are, and please tell us where you are viewing from. We love to hear from you, and we love to answer your comments and your questions, and we will read them out if we can as well. Tonight, another packed show. We're going to be dropping a lot of really good and interesting information tonight, and it's going to be really educational. So stick around. We're going to be talking primarily around our 3-point program, which you may see in the back here on this AFFG flag, which we've got printed with our 3-point program. We're going to be going through those these 3 points of our program, and we're going to be explaining exactly what we mean by each of them and what each of them will require. What's mass immigration? What does stopping it mean? What does lowering it mean? How do we stop the boats? And why do we want no resettlement of the boat people in Scotland, or indeed anywhere in the United Kingdom? And a lot of this is in preparation as well, of course, for this Saturday, the 7th of September, only 2 or 3 days from now, where the Glasgow Cabbie is holding his pro-UK rally, which is subtitled Enough is Enough. And of course, he is referring to the mass immigration into our country. There you go. Stand together to protect our country in George Square, 7th of September at 1 p.m. This will remain a peaceful protest. Good stuff. Good stuff. Okay. So that is this Saturday, folks. It's at 1 p.m. You'll want to get there in plenty of time, and you want to be in George Square in plenty of time. And if you're there, please do introduce yourself. It's going to be a busy day. The Glasgow Cabbie has got several speakers lined up. There is talk of a counter-protest from the usual subjects, but don't let that bother you in any way. I'm sure the police have got it all in hand, and I'm sure the police, who have got lots of experience of dealing with the counter-protesters, will be able to keep them at a safe distance. So don't let the counter-protesters put you off. Don't let the nasty names that the counter-protesters are using to describe the attendees at the event, don't let any of that put you off. This is a battle, for a democratic battle, for essentially the future of Scotland. Do we agree that Scotland should continue to be subject to mass immigration and fraudulent asylum seeking, or do we want to secure Scotland's borders? And the people who don't want to secure Scotland's borders, the people who want open borders, and the people who have no regard for the safety of people in Scotland or throughout the United Kingdom, they will be doing their darndest in order to try to shut everyone up. But we will not be shut up, because we will be heard, because we are in the right. So please do come along to the Glasgow Cabbie's Enough is Enough pro-UK rally this Saturday, the 7th of September at 1 p.m. So we will see you there. We're looking forward to an important day in Scottish history, when the people of Glasgow and Scotland and anywhere else in the United Kingdom that want to come up will say, enough is enough. We're not tolerating the narratives of the elite who misrule us, which is essentially to destroy Scotland as a meaningful country. And that program, that's a Force for Goods program. We're not saying that any other speakers at the event would necessarily be following that program. That's simply what we're saying. It would be our program if we were in government, and it's what we want to publicize as well, because we need to normalize those 3 points: to stop mass immigration, to stop the boats and send them back, and no resettlement of the boat people in Scotland. That's what we need to do. And if we can normalize those 3 points, then the politicians will have to listen. And at the moment, the politicians don't want to listen. They just simply want to preen themselves, morally speaking. They just want to emote about Scotland's values and isn't diversity wonderful? And, you can agree with all of that if you want, but that doesn't mean that we should have 1.2 million people coming into the United Kingdom every year. Okay, you can enjoy diversity as much as you want, but that's not connected to the matter at hand, which is the scale of immigration and the fraudulent asylum seeking that the country is being subjected to. Okay, and what you find with these people is they will just emote. John Swinney was emoting yesterday in the Scottish Parliament about Scotland's values, and apparently that's all to do with diversity, if you didn't know. And you can say, okay, fine, John, but what about mass immigration? What about the country being invaded by small boats? What about resettling people of whom we know nothing around Scotland? Do you have a position on that at all? Do you even care? Are you for opening Scotland's borders to the world, or are you for securing Scotland's borders? And you see, politicians won't listen to people unless they fear that they'll lose the vote. They can take everything away from us, but they can't take our vote away. And our vote in a democratic society is very precious. And we cannot be squandering it on people who will destroy our country, whether that's Labour or the SNP or the Lib Dems or the Greens or the Tories. If they're not for these 3 points, we cannot be voting for these people. And we will get plenty of chances to vote for them. Next year in 2025, it's the English Council elections. In 2026, it's the Scottish and Welsh elections. And in 2027, it's the Scottish Council elections. So these 3 points will remain current for the next 3 years and beyond. And it's our job to normalize the conversation around these 3 points. And it's the job of our opponents to make sure those 3 points don't get heard. It's the job of our opponents to try to smear people who will bring attention to these 3 points. It's our job as people who believe in borders, who believe in Scotland, who believe in the United Kingdom, to normalise these points. And this is an important point. You might be a Scottish nationalist, in which case you will differ with me on the value of the union of the UK. But surely as a Scottish nationalist, you would want Scotland's borders to be protected. But your leader in the SNP or in the Greens, they don't want Scotland's borders to be protected. They want Scotland to be open to the world. And the only excuse they will have is diversity, which is meant to be some kind of good that we're all just meant to agree with. But of course, with diversity comes other diverse things that don't necessarily help society. But even if we believed in diversity, that wouldn't change the point that immigration is too high. We need to stop the invasion via the small boats. We need to send them back, and we need to ensure that the people of whom we know nothing are not resettled in our country, that they are given a swift ticket home. And hey, we'll pay for it as well, because we're already paying for them to have hotel accommodation. The figures that we see are around about £8 million a day going to hotel accommodation for these people. Well, let's just pay them money to send them home. Get them on the next flight. Here's the money, mate. And here's a wee grant. Go home and stay home. It can be done perfectly easily, and it can be done perfectly humanely as well. And that's what these are the points that must be normalized going forward. These are the points that the national conversation will need to start hearing. Now, I want to firstly speak about the first point: stop mass immigration. Now, what does that actually mean? Because when you think about it, what is mass immigration? How much is too much? How much becomes mass? When does it just go back to immigration per se? It's a very good question, and it doesn't necessarily have a specific answer. But one thing that we do know is in 2022 and in 2023, around about 1.2 million immigrants came in each year in 2022 and in 2023. 1.2 million long-term immigrants came in, far higher than the number of people who left, meaning that the net figure at the end of the day was somewhere around, in 2023, somewhere around 600,000. We'll have the exact figures for you in a moment when we look at a very helpful website which details all of this. So that's certainly mass immigration. And I was thinking to myself, if somebody were to ask me, what kind of figures should we be getting back to? What would I say? And there are two ways of looking at it. There is firstly gross immigration, which is just the sheer number of people coming in. And there is net immigration, which is the difference between the people coming in and the people coming out. So which of these figures should we choose? Well, we should really be choosing gross immigration, because if you choose net immigration, it's 1.2 million people coming in, 1.2 million leaving, and hey, 0 is the net figure. Yeah, but you still didn't want the 1.2 million people coming in the first place. So what we need to be looking at is just what is the gross immigration, in this case 1.2 million, and getting it right down to as little as possible. So I thought to myself, right, let us examine the figures. The mass immigration that we know today really started to take off after Tony Blair came in 1997, in May 1997. So let's look at the 30 years prior and inclusive of 1997. So that takes us back to, well, actually 31 years, 1967 figures right up to the 1997 figures. Let's look at that 30-year period in the late 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and the first half of the 90s, when mass immigration was not really seen as a problem, not really seen as an issue for most people anyway. So let's look at what was the gross immigration each year from 1967 to 1997. And when you look at the figures, it is actually surprisingly high. But what you also find is that in many of these years, in fact, in most of these years, there was more people leaving. And you can imagine that's probably accurate. In the late 60s and 70s and 80s, there was a lot of white British people leaving for Canada, Australia, New Zealand, especially. And so in 1967, there was 225,000 people came in, and there was 309,000 people left. So the net immigration was actually minus 84,000. Let's bring up the screen which demonstrates this. Now, we'll send the link out for this page in the threads so that you'll be able to see it for yourself. But this is the long-term migration figures from 1964 to 2023 in thousands. And this handy graph down here, we can go to 1967. We can bring it up, and it says that immigration, as I say, 225,000, emigration 309, meaning that the country was 84,000 fewer people in that year. 1968, 222,000 coming in, 278 left, meaning that was net migration of minus 56,000. And that continued right up until 1979. Here we are, 1979, when immigration in was 195,000 and emigration was 189, meaning that there was a net inward flow of 6,000 people, a little bit different from 2023, when immigration was 1,218,000, emigration was 532,000, and so the net inflow was 685,000. But as we say, the real figure that we need to concentrate on is the gross immigration of 1.2 million. And there also in 2022, gross immigration in 1,234,000, emigration 489, meaning a net inflow of 745, almost 750,000. Utterly ridiculous when you compare it to 1964, when in fact net migration was minus 60,000. So what I did this afternoon was I took the averages of the 31 years, inclusive of 1967 to 1997, to find out what was the average gross immigration over those 31 years. And the average was 229,000. Over those 31 years, the average emigration, the average outflow, was 238,000, meaning that over those 31 years, there was a net average of 9,000 people, just 9,000 people leaving the country over those 31 years. So that figure of gross average immigration per year coming into the country, 229,000, let's say 230,000, just to round it up. Well, we can at least say that we should be getting back to that figure. That should just be a normal baseline figure. We're currently cruising around the 1 million, 1.25 million gross a year. Surely the immediate aim should simply be to cut that straight back to the average gross immigration between the years 67 and 97, which would be cutting it back to 230,000, cutting it back by at least 1 million a year. That's a very reasonable proposition. I mean, that's still 230,000 people coming into the country each year. Now, we don't know how many people are going to be leaving, probably more than that. But so what? It doesn't really matter if people are leaving. It's about who's coming in. And so when we say stop mass immigration, what we're meaning is we stop the 1.2 million per year that are coming in and get it straight back to the historic average between the years 67 and 97. And that would be cutting it straight back to no more gross immigration, no more coming in than 230,000 a year. And that's an incredibly reasonable, incredibly liberal proposition. I personally would like to see it taken down far lower than that. But that's justifiable by historic norms. And in politics, you need to find ways of justifying your behavior, in order to be convincing, and in order to relate it to reality. And so that was the historic norm of gross immigration between 67 and 1997, was approximately 230,000 incomers a year. We're not talking about how many left. We're talking about incomers a year. We're not talking about the net. We're not talking about the difference between incomers and outgoers. We're just talking about getting it down to 230,000 incomers a year, for starters. For starters. And that can be easily justifiable, democratically, liberally speaking. That's a policy that everybody on all parties could get behind if they were reasonable, is getting it down to the historic norm between those 30 years. And we choose 1997 as the cutoff because that's when it really started to go. Because if you look at 1997 here, immigration was 327 gross. Then it goes up to 391 gross in 1998, and it just keeps coasting along and rising. And then in 2004, it's up to 589, dips a little bit there in 2008, keeps rising again to 604,000 in 2010, dips down, but it's still very high in 2012, 524,000 incomers. And then it just scooshes up in 2014 to 667,000. And then it dips down in 2020, and that was because of COVID. But look at it doesn't dip down at all, actually. Gross immigration, the net dips down to 93,000, but the gross incoming was 662,000. And then it just goes flying up in 2022 to 1.234. In other words, 1,234,000 gross incoming. So we need to get it back. We need to get it way back to the historic average between 1967 and 1997. And we don't, as I say, we don't really need to concentrate on the net migration, because if we get it down to 230,000 incoming, the net, the emigration is going to be a lot higher than that. And you'll actually find the net is probably going to be a minus quantity, which is fine, because it doesn't matter. Here's the thing, it doesn't matter if your population is decreasing. The political class will say, we need an increasing population. No, we don't. We don't need an increasing population. An economy will adjust regardless of what the population size is. Nobody goes about saying Greenland needs more people. The Greenland economy no doubt functions perfectly fine. The Japanese economy has got a declining population, but so what if it just went down to a few tens of thousands of Japanese? They'll just have more room. So like a declining population isn't an issue. And people say, well, you need somebody to pay the pensions. No, you don't. We live in a world where government creates money out of nothing. You do not need to import people in order to work at a minimum wage, in order to deliver fast food, in order to pay for elderly care. The government can create money out of nothing if it wants. That's a hidden fact that the so-called economists of the world don't want you to know, because the international capitalists who make money out of lending to government don't want you to know that fact. But it is a fact. So you don't need a rising population to pay your pensions. You don't need a rising population to take care of the elderly. You don't need a rising population for the sake of a rising population. All of these are just fables, economic fables. But the people who promote open borders will always wheel these out, as will some of the so-called right-wing capitalist sorts also. So yeah, stop mass immigration. Stop mass immigration. And that's legal immigration. Stop that. Get it way back. We don't need 1.2 million legal immigrants. We need it to be cut back, for starters, to the historic norm, which was between 1967 and 1997, which is 230,000 a year, which is still a massive figure, and it's still probably too much. But that should be the aim for starters. Okay, then once we reach that, we can see the economy will have adjusted and we can see if we can take it down even further. But that's a good starting point. Get it right down to that historic norm for starters. And nobody can complain about that. Even the people who want immigration, they can't complain about that, can they? Nobody can complain about that policy if they are coming from a position of good faith. If they're coming from a genuine position, they can't complain about that policy. Secondly, and so importantly, and all this has to be done at the same time, we have to stop the boats and send them back. And this is such an important policy because it's almost symbolic. In 2018, our country started to be invaded across the English Channel, and our governments did nothing about it. And now it's just got preposterous with hundreds of people coming in every day across the English Channel. And this is causing all sorts of problems. And do not tell me that these people are poor, persecuted, desperate, vulnerable, or whatever adjectives you want to make up to describe them. No, they're not. They're largely young men, or they are people who are trying to get into Britain for economic purposes. Okay, and they need to be sent back to wherever they came from. And really, if there's conflict in the countries that they came from, that's just something that they are going to have to deal with. But in most cases, there's not even any conflict in the countries that they come from. And so they can all be sent back. All of these people need to be sent back. But Alistair, Keir Starmer's never going to do that. I know he's not going to do that. But what we can do as people is normalize the conversation. We can normalize that policy. We can normalize hearing about stopping the boats and sending them back. If we can normalize that conversation, then the politicians will be forced to take heed and act on it, or at least move towards acting on it in such a way. And that's why the opponents of what we're saying scream so loudly, because they don't want that to be normalized as a talking point. Because if it is normalized as a talking point, their game is up. Their game is up. So they have to keep this discussion out of the public arena. And they've been hitherto very successful in doing that. And another thing that they've been very successful in doing is scaring people away from even touching this issue, or even being involved in any way, even coming along to stand in George Square. They're trying to scare people away by saying that the people who are speaking are ugly people, or they're political extremists or whatever. And so this is all done in an attempt to keep this discussion out of the public space. But we have to bring it into the public space, and we have to let it be heard, because it's a very, very serious, a very responsible, a very fair argument that we are making. We need to get mass immigration right back, for starters, to the historic 30-year norm between 1967 and 1997. And we need to stop the fraudulent invasion of our country. And we need to do what is required. And you only need the Royal Navy and the Royal Marines to tow these boats back to France. And within a month, they will stop coming. And the French will do what they have to do in order to get these people out of France, because the French are having trouble. Guerrilla war, inverted commas, breaks out in coastal French town to the latest migrant jungle. And this is about how more French security on the beaches has led to violent clashes that have spilt onto the streets of seaside French towns. This is in the Telegraph on the 29th of August 2024. And interestingly, all the people in France that they speak to, all the people in these coastal towns, are probably just NGOs and civil society organization spokespeople, but they're all just saying that this violence could be solved if they just let them go across the English Channel. Somebody says here, now that police are preventing them from leaving, it's become war, a war between police and migrants, he adds. If the police would just let them cross, there'd be no problem. Migrants driven away from the beaches now look to towns such as Grand Fort Philippe, with canals and rivers from where they can launch boats. away from the new surveillance and security system on the beaches. French police are now puncturing boats and chasing out migrants who habitually hide out in the local Parc de l'Estran and in historic bunkers that are relics from the Second World War. Many locals tell the Telegraph they want the police to step aside and let the migrants cross as an easy way to restore order. Well, I suppose it would be an easy way to restore order when you've got a Britain that just lets them cross. But if we were to stop these boats and we were to drag them back, then the French would realize that we're serious, and the French would go, crikey, what we need to actually do now is clear out these camps and get them on flights back to wherever it was that they came from. And that actually would be the best way, Mr. Frenchman, to solve the problem in your village, not exporting the problem across the English Channel so that we all end up with them. Which brings us to the third point, which is no resettlement of the boat people in Scotland, because we don't know who these people are. We know that most of them are young men. We don't know where they come from. We don't know what their personal lives have been. We don't know if some of them are dangerous or violent or what anything about them is. And we don't know to what extent they can even contribute to our society, if at all. And so this is not a way for them to come in, and they need to know that, and they need to be sent back, and there should be no resettlement of them. And none of them should be receiving asylum, and none of them should be resettled anywhere in Scotland. And once you normalize that conversation, a lot of these people will just think, you know what, I don't really like living here. I'm just going to go home. Because there would be nothing for them here. If there's no welfare payment, if there's no place for them to stay, they can go back. They don't need to stay here. There's nothing for them in Scotland. There's nothing for them in the UK. So we need to normalize those 3 points. But listen, I've spoken enough. There's a lot of comments coming in. Debbie says, good evening, one and all. Starmer was a tad rattled at PMQs today. Good evening, Alistair and family. Swinney setting up over 500 million cutbacks, so who will he blame? Indeed. Ian says, I wish I could join this rally on Saturday, the 7th of September. British Legend says, I will be there. Good. We look forward to seeing you, British Legends. Harry says, you are 100% correct. Good on you. Brilliant. Sammy Shaw says, we will be there on Saturday. Derek says, stop the benefit system where we had put our tax money to people who have never contributed to our society. Give it back to our pensioners who have contributed all their working life. Absolutely. That's where it should be going. Gordon says, have a good day on Saturday. Don't wear masks. Just fly your flags. Protect children. Absolutely. Derek also says, our communities are unrecognizable and public services are all overrun with immigration. Time for change. Hello to Scotland Scorpion. Good. Now, talking about rallies, there was one on Saturday in Dumfries, and this was a Stop Illegal Immigration rally, and we mentioned it last week. And so some people might be wondering, how did that go? Well, we were simply publicizing it. It wasn't in any way organized by us. It was called Stop Illegal Immigration, and the poster they were using was I am a concerned father, #NotFarRight. And so they did gather on Saturday at noon at the Fountain in Dumfries High Street, and we've got one or two pictures of them, which we'll just put up here. There's the first one. I was told by somebody who was involved in that over the course of the 2 hours that they were out, around about 100 people came along to show their support. They had one or two posters. They had the Union Jack there that you can see. That's a group of them standing around at the time. And one of the posters that they had, which I really quite liked, was this one coming up, which we'll just put up. Said, "Local needs, not global problems." Isn't that so true? We need to be focusing on what's the local need. And the local need in this case is not for lots of young boat people or young boatmen to be housed at one of the local hotels. It's not, their global issues should not be our problems. We need to be concentrating on the local needs, not global problems. Okay. And there's another picture of the demonstration at the fountain in High Street from a different angle. Okay. Now, there was a small counter protest at the time, and there were far fewer people on that, it should be said, than there were at the Stop Illegal Immigration rally, I'm glad to say. Anyway, thank you to the person that sent us those photographs from the day, and hopefully there'll be more of these demonstrations. And really all it is local people who are in a position to have a gathering, a peaceful gathering, to make their point of view heard. And many people are perhaps reluctant to go to such things because they're not sure, well, what's the message? What's the political message here? And that's why we come up with our 3-point program. Stop mass immigration. For starters, get it back to the 30-year historic norm between 1967 and 1997, prior to the period where it really took off. Get gross immigration back to that level. Let emigration take care of itself and see where we are from that. Stop the boats and send them back, which is also as an appeal against all fraudulent asylum seeking, which is most asylum seeking. You know, you could actually abolish the asylum process tomorrow and not allow asylum, except in particular instances that the government chooses to accept. Because not many people know that we're signed up to accept anybody who comes in claiming asylum, but we also have particular asylum routes for different countries. So we can actually scrap the automatic granting of asylum completely. And if we thought that there was a country that we needed to take people from for some reason, then we could set up a particular program specifically for that country. For example, we have it at the moment for Afghanistan and Hong Kong. And then the rest of the world just comes in on the general asylum program. And the rest of the world is largely coming in on a fraudulent basis. Those things. Now, who is going to be coming on Saturday? Saturday, the 7th of September, 2024, the Enough is Enough rally in George Square at 1 p.m. Folks, come along, bring your flags, bring your saltires, bring your Union Jacks, bring your St. George crosses, bring your St. David flags, bring your Ulster flags, bring your British flags. Come along and let's show that the good people of Glasgow and Scotland are opposed to mass immigration. And the Glasgow Cabbie put up a really nice, colourful poster. Looks like an AI generated poster, which is really, really nice. Let's stick that up. And he said that he liked that and he thought that that conveyed the spirit of patriotism and hope for Britain. And isn't that a fantastic photograph? That's a really, really, really good. So if we can come along with that spirit, with that kind of attitude, with that kind of mentality, with that kind of hope, with that kind of positivity, then we can really make a difference. Okay. Because what we're about doing is about changing the narrative. It's about taking away the narrative, the megaphone from those who would simply destroy Scotland, which is to say all the NGOs, all the trade unions, all the politicians who want nothing but more and more and more immigration and want more and more fraudulent asylum seeking and will do nothing to protect the people of this country. We have to protect our country. We have to stop mass immigration. We have to get back to the historic norm between 1967 and 1997 for starters. And we need to stop the boats, send them back, and ensure no resettlement of all of these people throughout the United Kingdom, because they don't belong here and it's not their country and they didn't work for it and they need to go home. That's the new narrative. And what we can do is publicize that and make it known. And force the politicians to respond, because the politicians will respond if they feel that they're going to lose our vote. For now, they prefer to emote about diversity. Well, hey, we can all love diversity if we want, but we don't need 1.2 million people coming into the country each year, no matter how much you love diversity. TC says, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I'm going to miss Debbie. She says she can't be there because she's in the air for the air show. Well, talking about the air show and talking about the Royal Navy, and this is a complete change of subject, there was one of the Royal Navy destroyers that's being built down on the Clyde by BAE Systems. It was floated out yesterday. It's called HMS Cardiff. And we've got a picture of it, a quite spectacular picture, which we'll just put up, which appeared in the Edinburgh Evening News today, the 4th of September. And that's HMS Cardiff being what they call floated out onto the Clyde. It says there, HMS Cardiff makes its first journey on a giant barge floating down the River Clyde. The Royal Navy's newest Type 26 frigate is the second of 8 anti-submarine warfare ships being constructed at the BAE Systems Govan shipyard in Glasgow. Goes on to say, the semi-submersible barge will carry the 500-foot-long ship to a deep water site in the west of Scotland, where in the coming days it will be gently lowered into the water for the first time. It will then be towed back upriver to the Scotstoun site, where fitting out work will continue to prepare the ship for delivery. And we're apparently told that this floating out is what they do now. They don't launch it down a ramp, or they don't launch it sideways, that for some reason they find this to be the most efficacious way of getting a massive ship into the river, or at least these ones that they're building down in the Govan area of Glasgow. Well, that's fantastic. That's HMS Cardiff. Okay. Ernest says, illegal immigrants are a conspiracy not only against Scotland, but against the whole of Europe. Well said. Well said. Sikola says, tourism is also going to be affected by these illegal migrants. That's for sure. Watch Scotland says, the trade unions are on the side of the middle class, not the working class. We are the working class. TC says, diversity built absolutely nothing in our United Kingdom, Great Britain and Ireland. The 4 home nations built it all. That's absolutely right, isn't it? The cities, the towns, the villages, the farmland, everything was built by the British people. And it was only recently and especially since 1997, that extremely large numbers of people started to come in. And so the political class had to find a way to try to justify this. And they came up with all their diversity theories and all their academic concepts. And at the moment, they're pushing various academic concepts in order to delegitimize the white, let's just say it, indigenous population, in order to make them feel that somehow they're not entitled to the land of their forefathers. We know everything that's going on and we can see it. And we do our best to try to get that message out. And that's why the counter-protesters hate people like ourselves and people like our viewers and others who can see what's going on and know what the alternative is and are not afraid to promote a perfectly democratic, perfectly legitimate, perfectly reasonable alternative. They are the ones who are the extremists, and they evidence that in their attitudes. Very sad. There you go. And we've got a lot at our shop, including our latest magazine, Union Heart, Volume 2 of Indie Myths Busted. We bust another 10 separatist so-called arguments in this cracking magazine, available at our shop. It's also available free, as are all our magazines, to people who are monthly donors. And so if you're a monthly donor and you haven't got this free of charge, just drop us an email and we'll get that straight to you. If you'd like to become a monthly donor, then please go to our website, aforceforgood.uk/union-supporters. And we'll get that link up there as well for free magazines. There you go. That's where you get that. Our next magazine, God willing, is going to be a 16-pager, and it's going to be on the First World War, because this is the 110th anniversary of the commemorating the 110th anniversary of the beginning of that tragic conflict. And so we're working slowly on that, but as you can imagine, that's a big project. But God willing, we'll get that done before autumn is out. And so back to our shop, you can get also, you'll get, if you're a union supporter, £10 a month, you'll get a free copy of our wee book as well. And if you just want to buy that, you'll get that again from our shop, aforceforgood.uk/shop-1. And we do push our merchandise because it is a way that keeps us on the road, because we don't have any major donors. We do have some great union supporters, some great monthly donors though. And we've also got other things at our shop, such as these greetings cards of the Kelpies. We've got tons of stuff. We've really been building it up. And please don't forget our cracking One Big Country, which you can get off of Amazon. You just go to amazon.co.uk and you search for One Big Country, a big book for the Union, Volume 1, the first of a projected series of 5 books, patriotic books on the Union, Britishness, and other patriotic issues. So just go to amazon.co.uk for that one. Where are we? Let's go to, here we are. Search Amazon for One Big Country. Let's get rid of that shop. Good. Okay, we're at the top of the hour, so we'll just close out now. And just to remind you, big day on Saturday. Please do come along. Do not let the media put you off. Do not let the so-called counter-protesters put you off. Do not let their screeching put you off. Do come along. Do enjoy the day. Bring your friends. Bring everybody and come along, and let's stand behind the pro-UK rally organised by the Glasgow Cabbie. That's at 1 o'clock, so you want to be getting there early. It's going to be a good day. It's going to be an enjoyable day. And it's going to be a day that changes history as well, because it's the first time ever that there's been an immigration restrictionist rally in George Square. And let me tell you, folks, it's not going to be the last time, because the cat's out the bag now. We've got a policy. We know what needs to be done. We need to normalise the narrative, and we need to protect our country. We need to protect Scotland, and we need to protect the United Kingdom. It's well past time, but it's never too late to change it. It's never too late to change it. And we're looking forward to starting that changing process for the better on Saturday at the Glasgow Cabbies rally at 1 p.m. George Square, Glasgow, Saturday, the 7th of September. See you there. It just remains, folks, it just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next time.